Hello there and welcome to another episode of Home Tech. Happy to be with you. Jason Griffin here, joined again by Seth. Seth, how are you?
Doing well, Jason. How's it going over on the West Coast?
It's going great. Busy as ever, but excited to be sitting down with you here. We've got another exciting episode, a lot of news stories we wanted to touch on. Once again, no guests this week, so just you and me here kind of kicking around some news stories.
Yeah, I think you and I were talking a little bit before we hit record. Things have been kind of hectic in our industry lately, and I think that's kind of showing.
Busy time.
Busy time, and there's also there's not too much news out there, but the stories that dropped this week were kind of big, and I think we could just kind of dive right into them.
Yeah, definitely. Before we jump into news stories, I did want to touch on one quick follow-up from last week. We had put out the episode 63 we called If This, Then What? And, if anybody hasn't listened to that episode, amongst other stories, one of the things we touched on was the announcement that the Amazon Echo had become, had launched an If channel. So you could integrate it with If This, Then That. And we were sort of talking about it, and if this then that is everywhere. And we were saying, well, is this really significant? Is this really useful to people? And we had kind of gone back and forth about that. And we had asked, if there was anybody listening who had thoughts about if this then that, or maybe, compelling use cases, things that they were using it for, to reach out and contact us. We had a couple people do that. And I wanted to kind of chat about one. A gentleman by the name of Doug Krug reached out. And Doug, thank you so much for taking the time to reach out to us. We appreciate it. And his example was using if this then that for, basically in conjunction with his alarm system to kind of arm and disarm the system based on geolocation. And he kind of had some interesting thoughts about that, which, I know, Seth, that you were kind of saying you have mixed feelings about using any sort of geofencing or if this then that for alarm purposes, right? But I know a lot of people do that. I just... it's kind of one of those divisive issues, I think, a little bit, where some people feel okay about it and others get a little bit iffy on that.
Yeah, and I guess I'm taking the stance as an integrator. As an integrator, I would never program an automation system to disarm an alarm system. Just flat out would never do it, because that should be done by the homeowner, and I don't want that take on that liability.
So I guess you're right. It's a little bit different if you're doing this as a profession versus if it's something you're doing kind of in your home, right? Yeah,
exactly. And what he's doing, you can do with alarm.com, and you can set up the geo fencing on their alarm.com app and kind of do the same thing with alarm.com service. So plenty of homeowners can already do this. I was just kind of musing from, I guess, my standpoint. I would never set that up as something to do as a professional, but as a homeowner, that's a great little feature, because as you get close to the house, the alarm can just turn off. You get a notification that it's turned off, and you walk right in the house. I mean, some of them you can even chain events and unlock doors, so you just walk up to your house and it unlocks.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about if this then that is if you have an alarm system that's integrated into the if this then that service, but maybe doesn't have that geofencing type of functionality built right into it, as a native feature of the app, that's what this service is perfect for, is kind of tying these things together. And that was sort of the point that Doug was making, is that it's really nice to have that option, right? And that's what if this then that opens up for a lot of people, is that ability to kind of integrate things between different vendors and those sort of integrations that otherwise you might not be able to do. I had a couple of thoughts on as far as his specific use case, and he was talking about how it can be a little bit annoying sometimes because for him in particular, him and his wife, he said, both work very close to home, and what they've found ends up happening is sometimes the alarm will unintentionally get disarmed. And he said there's no way for it to be smart enough to really realize okay, the alarm got disarmed, but nobody ever opened a door to enter the house, so maybe I should rearm myself. And I don't think that's so much a limitation of if this then that, as it is just, kind of the conscious home. And that's that sort of intelligence right there that seems very obvious to the human brain. So it's a little bit harder to address programmatically and to automate it. And I think that's a perfect example of, when we talk about the difference between home control and true, smart home, kind of the future of home automation, which is something we've referred to as the conscious home, where it's that next level of intelligence, where it's able to kind of make really intelligent decisions and correct for some of these errors that right now we just really don't have that kind of intelligence built into our systems. And so I think it's an interesting point, not necessarily one that's exclusive to if this then that, but just in general.
Right. And that problem actually stems from cell phone batteries, because the way your cell phone is able to have a small supercomputer running inside of it and all of these radio antennas, it has to go down into like this low power mode for most of the time. And every now and then it'll wake up, it'll fire up one of those radios, maybe the GPS, and use some energy and then shut it back down. So what it's doing there is, if he happens to be in a spot that doesn't have like a GPS signal getting in strong enough, the phone will report itself being at a particular location, but there's like it's usually reported in meters for the developer, but there's usually like a distance measurement, an accuracy measurement. So it says I'm here, but I could be off by like 30, 40 meters or 500 meters, depending on how bad that signal coming in was. So that's what he's seeing there. What he's doing is his accuracy is crossing into that threshold, which is kicking off the triggers to if this then that, and that goes in through the to disarm his alarm system. There's nothing he can do about that other than kind of wait till we get better GPS. Or you know what? Actually, one of the things you and I like the most could fix this. Bluetooth low energy iBeacons, beacons in general. That would be something that could possibly fix this, because that is a small radio signal. It's only going to kick in when he's within 10, 20, 30 feet of the house. And if that could be triggered through if this and that somehow, definitely that would solve the issue right there.
Yeah, and I think what he's getting at, and I don't want to spend too much more time on this particular thing, but he's also talking about kind of that next level of logic that you could, in theory, do with a system like, I don't know, Crestron, for instance, comes to mind, where you could potentially have some sort of logic that you could program where it's like, okay, if my alarm disarms based off of geofencing, start a timer and then run that timer in the background. And if within a minute of that happening, if no doors or windows, if no doors open, as in like it was a false disarm and I didn't actually come home, then rearm the system. Sort of like putting that sort of logic in is definitely something that can be done with like a customized solution from someone like Crestron. But yeah, if you're operating in the world of if this then that, then I don't know that you're ever going to get that next level of logic, right?
Right. And I mean that same thing could be done in Control 4 within like 5 minutes of programming. I can think of how to do it pretty quickly. I'm pretty sure Savant could probably do something like that. I'm just not sure.
There's always a way.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyways, well, Doug, we want to thank you again for reaching out, and Doug and I were kind of exchanging some emails. He's doing some interesting things in the smart home space. If anyone's interested in connecting with him, he's on Twitter at Doug Krug, and his last name spelled Krug. So thanks again, Doug.
Yeah, thanks, Doug.
Moving on from that, we wanted to talk about former guest of the show here and friends of the show, the people over there at Ring had a big week this week. I saw a story come across that the Ring doorbell is now in Best Buy stores. So they've got distribution now in 434 Best Buy stores, and that's obviously a big deal for them. I'm sure it's an exciting time to be at Ring, and I had reached out on Twitter to congratulate them on that news. That's pretty exciting for them, I'm sure.
Yeah, and they have certainly been improving the product. I can tell you. You remember I bought that one for a client to test it out. It died. The saga went on for like 2 weeks, and then I finally got the new one in. We tested it out for like 2, maybe 3 weeks. Installed it to the client, and we haven't heard a peep from the guy. So he seems to be pretty happy with the.
No news is good news.
Yeah. Oh man. And with this guy, no news is good news. Absolutely good news.
Yeah. We've had another friend of the show, a longtime listener, Ron Mervine, who we hope to get on someday here in the near future for one of our listener segments. He exchanges a lot of emails with us, and he's been really kind of going back and forth on the smart doorbell thing. And admittedly, I think he had kind of a rough experience with his first Ring, but now he kind of tried a different one, and now he's actually back to Ring. He got another one, and he says it's working great. So I think that they're I'm hearing it from you and I'm hearing it from him, and I have to imagine they're continually trying to improve the product, and it sounds like they're succeeding in that. I know the product in general is pretty, I would say, refined compared to like the initial, it used to be Doorbot for anyone who's not familiar. And that was a great product and pretty, I'd say, revolutionary at the time it came out. They were really the first mover in that smart doorbell market, but they've kind of rebranded and refined the product, and I think they're looking pretty strong.
Yeah, it is a nice looking product too. I've seen a couple of other ones out on the market. I think there's one called Skybell that I've looked at pretty heavily that has some interesting different features that the Ring doesn't have, but all of it's kind of like one of those software updates, and then we'll have feature parity across these different devices,
right?
And they'll just be kind of banking on competing on quality, which is great. But I really like how the Ring look, and this new product they just came out with. The Chime, yeah. I really want to get one of these along with a Ring doorbell, because this is a great companion piece.
Yeah, it's a clever little piece. They came out with it. I just announced it this week, and it's basically what it is like a little chime for your Ring. Like, so what I mean by that is, a traditional, just really, we're going back to the old school here, analog doorbell that you would, have your electrician wire up at your door, would ring through some sort of just physical bell or chime inside of your house. And that's the idea of the Chime. It's a $20 piece, so the price point's very compelling. And you plug it into any electrical outlet, and it goes on the network, and it becomes like your equivalent of like an analog doorbell. So when somebody comes and rings on your Ring, it doesn't just go through to your phone anymore. You'll hear an audible ring inside of the house, which I think is pretty clever. I think if I had a Ring doorbell, this to me is kind of like a no-brainer, especially, I think they got the price point right.
Yeah, for $20, it is a no-brainer. But there are two things that come to mind. This is always a problem in homes that I'm in, where there's one doorbell that's installed. Usually it's in a central location, which is pretty good, but you can't hear it everywhere in the house. So a lot of times clients ask us, how can I hear this doorbell elsewhere? And our solution, of course, is to come up with, this elaborate home automation thing that rings the doorbell through the speakers. But
through the speakers,
yeah. The whole thing. Blinks the lights and raises up. That's our solution. Don't ever ask a home automation guy how to
handle your doorbell.
Yeah. Or you could buy the $30, wireless doorbell thing from Home Depot. But don't listen to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for that kind of application, really would work well. The second thing I noticed on here is that you can actually upload custom tones to it, so you can have custom ringtones inside your house when you ring the doorbell, which is really cool.
Yeah, it just seems to me like it's a really compelling deal, especially like, I got to imagine a lot of people who own these, maybe what if you have like a housekeeper or a nanny who's at your house during the day, and neither you nor your wife are home, and somebody comes and rings the doorbell. Like, if you don't have this, then I guess you just don't hear anything, and you could potentially miss deliveries or whatever it is. And this just is kind of just going back to that old school analog, just convenience factor. I like this product. It's simple. They didn't try to overthink it or get too clever. They just came out with a $20 product that solves, I think, a real problem. And I think it was clever, and I hope they sell a lot of them.
Yeah. And one extra point, if you do have an analog doorbell inside of your house installed, if you use the Ring doorbell, it'll actually trigger that too. So,
okay.
So it'll actually make the old doorbell ring as well.
Got it.
So you have that option, but this would be better because you can upload custom tones,
You got it. You got to get that custom integration factor, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One day we'll be able to blink the lights off the thing too.
Well, speaking of custom integration, we wanted to follow up here on the Control 4 story. Last week we had talked about Control 4, and the stock was kind of getting beat up, and we had given our thoughts as to whether or not that's warranted, or if it's just kind of an overreaction by the stock market. The stock market's a fickle animal, and unfortunately that's kind of the nature of the beast. And you can either go sky high on that thing, or you can kind of get slammed around if the perception goes south on you. And I think they kind of, in my opinion, got beat up a little bit too much for having a bad quarter. I mean, that's my take on it. I'm no stock analyst, but that's what I feel like. And that's kind of what we talked about last week. And I think they're feeling the same way. They announced this week that they're going to do a $20 million stock buyback, which once again, not being a guy who really dabbles in the stock market or follows it too much. I do know that a lot of times companies will do this if they feel like, just like I said, their stock took a hit, that they feel like, now it's being undervalued. This is kind of their way to sort of offset that and put their money on the table and say, we think that this was unwarranted, and we're going to back that up by putting our own skin in the game, so to speak. And so I think that this speaks to kind of Control 4's feeling, right, about how the stock is being valued right now, and it'll be interesting to see kind of how this plays out and affects the stock price moving forward. I do know that it was up at least a little bit this week. I didn't follow the exact numbers, but I was reading it was kind of being heavily traded this week, and that it was kind of rising back up. So interesting story.
Yeah, we got a lot of feedback from that, especially from friend of the show, Richard Gunther over at Home Own podcast. And he was saying, and a lot of people were saying that, they kind of got beat up because they didn't show any perceived innovation in the area. And of course, they had a pretty bad Q1. And, I don't know if I'd agree with that completely, but, they didn't have very much to offer other than new touchscreens and a new interface for a thermostat this past, ISE, which, take what you will. The new touchscreens look pretty good. I think they'll sell well as a dealer. I mean, a lot of dealers seem to be pretty excited about them. I just learned today that you can kind of recess them into the wall and do kind of an invisible bezel thing around it where it kind of like flattens out, looks really nice in the wall. It's a third-party company. I'll have to look it up and put it in the show notes of which one it is. But there's all sorts of really cool things that are on the horizon for these guys. I think they'll have a better year, especially considering how busy I see most of our peers saying they are. Most people in this state are just absolutely slammed right now.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine that isn't, how it's going elsewhere in the U.S. and maybe a little, other places around the world that have been just really slow. I want to say there was also a pretty bad winter this year that kind of shut down areas. I don't know. Maybe that contributes to having a bad Q1, but not trying to make excuses. They did have a horribly bad Q1. Uh-huh. So, like I said last week, it doesn't matter how this performance happens in one. It's going to be like Q2, Q3, Q4. Like where are they heading? If they're not doing any better, then things are going to have to change.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. We were exchanging a few emails with Richard this week and talking about this. And while I agree with some of the points he was making about, innovation, and I think you made some good points as well. I mean, they are innovating. They've got new products coming out that look pretty good, but maybe not as visibly in terms of like software updates or something like that. But in any event, like my kind of point and thought on that is, yeah, I get it. But like really the stock market isn't that, like, I don't give the stock market that much credit for logical, intelligent choices about stock price. It's an emotional game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people that are investing in stocks, by and large, don't have that much of a nuanced view of what's going on, within this market, right? They're investing with more of, whatever it is. But I just highly doubt that came into play in terms of their stock price. Frankly, I think what happened is they had a rough quarter and the stock market overreacted. And I think that's really all there is to it.
Yeah, it is a great product. I really wish that more people could get their hands on Control 4 in particular. I think it's ready for some type of prime time debut. I think we talked. I'm not going to reiterate what we talked about last week, but it's definitely further along than I think most people actually realize. Mm-hmm. And maybe that has to happen in some dramatic way. I don't know. But it's definitely a very mature product at this point.
Well, they're friends of the show, and we certainly wish them the best. I know they got a lot of good people working there, and I think generally it's a good product, and I think that they're kind of a bellwether for the industry as well. And so I think generally anybody working in this business should be pulling for them, and we'll see how the rest of the year treats them.
Yep.
So moving on from that, we had a fairly big story this week. We were kind of skimming through an article by Mike Wolf from the Smart Home Show. Was kind of one of the main articles that I was reading about this, but it was, of course, covered multiple blogs. And it was the couple of big announcements by Samsung and SmartThings at IoT World this week.
Yeah. Well...
You know what that means.
Yeah, it looks like somebody came out with a new platform. So Samsung and SmartThings announced a turnkey smart home Internet of Things platform. This has all the buzzwords in it, right?
It sure does.
Gosh. So they're calling this thing Arctic, and it is a system on a chip, basically, that integrates directly with SmartThings platform, kind of cloud-based platform they're calling Open Cloud, it looks like.
Yep.
So this little device is really cool. It comes in 3 different flavors with 3 different price tags. The Arctic 1 module is targeted towards wearables, so it just has Bluetooth Low Energy in it, and motion trackers and stuff. It's designed for things that need like extra long battery lives that you don't want to be having to plug in or charge or anything like that. So wearables in general is a good use case. The Arctic 2 or Arctic, sorry, they go up increments of 5 here. The Arctic 5, that one has 802.15.4, which is Zigbee, and Thread, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi, a dual-core processor, and a video codec. So it could be a decent smart home appliance that you could embed into whatever you're making, to kind of be the central hub of whatever manufacturer decides to make. And it integrates back into the SmartThings Open Cloud, where they have kind of all that back-end remote access database taken care of. And then the Arctic 10, which is pretty much the same as the 5, but it's got a bigger, faster processor, more memory, and 1080p video. And according to The Verge, it's going to cost maybe about $100. So all in all, like a really compelling platform they've come up with. I mean, this is Samsung money we're talking about, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly compelling, and like you said, and clearly it shows that Samsung is serious about it. I mean, they acquired SmartThings, I believe it was last year, and that was like if I recall correctly, like a $200 million acquisition for them. So they've been placing large bets in this space now for about a year, and this looks to be like a pretty developed strategy. They've got different levels of these chips coming out, and this open cloud platform, which I think is an interesting aspect of the story that I definitely want to get your take on, with you being more of the developer and kind of having an eye for being able to sort of parse those stories out and make a little more sense of them. Obviously, the takeaway for me is just that they're serious about developing a strategy in here. And one of my first reactions to this, and you and I were talking about this tonight before we started recording, was like, well, is this some sort of answer to HomeKit? And you kind of corrected me, and I'd like for you to sort of elaborate on that for our listeners, because I think it's interesting, and I have to imagine I'm not the only one who looks at this and goes, oh, this is kind of Samsung's answer to HomeKit. But you're telling me like these are kind of different animals, right?
Yeah. Well, so to look at this, first off, this isn't the Samsung that you and I know and love that makes really cool smartphones that look just like Apple phones. And it's not the refrigerator Samsung. It's not the Samsung that makes heavy equipment for industrial use. This is the Samsung that makes the chips and whatnot that are actually in iPhones and in all the other smartphones in the world. So Samsung is a huge company, and this is just one side of them. And this is a platform. This isn't like HomeKit. HomeKit is just a database that Apple's. There's so much confusion still going on today about what HomeKit actually is. I see people posting on forums all the time saying, "Oh, I really don't understand what Apple's going to throw into the game here." Well, Apple's not really throwing anything into the game. They put a database on the phone that talks to all these cool devices that you purchase from wherever, as long as they're HomeKit compatible, they end up in this database. And then it's up to Apple's third-party developers to make really cool, compelling apps that drive the home automation process. And I think they have done a pretty good job of supplying apps to the App Store in the past. I think they're going to do a pretty good job again, and at least that's the hope. But look at HomeKit differently than you look at all the hardware stuff out there, because it's really not a hardware play other than just to sell you an iPhone and make sure you have some kind of Apple device in your hand when you're using it.
Yeah, I get it. And I intuitively understand that they are different approaches. Obviously, this is a hardware, they're actually putting out chips, right? And we know Apple's not doing that with HomeKit. It's a frame. HomeKit's basically a framework. I guess the comparison I'm drawing in my head is more on a business level. And these aren't direct comparisons, but it's interesting to me to watch kind of compare and contrast the different strategies of big players. Apple has made a decision to enter the smart home market with HomeKit. And this is, there's X, Y, and Z factors that come into how they're approaching it and why they made those decisions and pros and cons to that. Whereas Samsung is obviously a different company choosing to enter the market in a different way. And they're approaching it, acquiring SmartThings was a big move for them, obviously. And I think it's just interesting to watch all the big players, the Googles and the Samsungs and the Apples of the world, and how they're, taking different approaches to the smart home. And we've even been seeing, not to get us off on a tangent, but there was a story we talked about like last month, I believe, with Facebook and how they were sort of making some sort of play in the Internet of Things with, I believe it was Parse, right?
Right. So another platform. Yeah, another
platform. And so you've just got these gigantic companies with different approaches to the smart home. And I think it's fascinating to watch how everybody is approaching the market.
Yeah. So this is your what you're seeing here with Samsung. I mean, this is a kind of a play for the data broker side that we've talked about in the past.
Yeah.
So this is competing with Xively, AT&T, M2M, Amazon. All of these fun, huge Google, I guess, in some respects, all these people who just want to harness this data and put it into one source and have the most efficient database built for it. That's a huge play. And I think we had a guest on. I'm trying to remember his name.
Daniel Obadovsky.
There you go. Yeah, I knew it was Daniel. I just couldn't remember his last name.
Yeah, he's the author of Silent Intelligence, which is a book all about the Internet of Things. And that was a great episode. We really enjoyed talking to him. And part of what we talked about in that conversation is where Daniel sees a lot of really big opportunities in the Internet of Things is this sort of data brokerage where you're pulling in, device data and sensor data all into your cloud and kind of parsing that out and allowing different manufacturers, I guess, to sort of tie in and do value-added services and devices on top of that, right? And I think that's kind of where Open Cloud, which is the name for the SmartThings cloud service that they're offering, is trying to go. They say we're allowing the device maker to focus on the value-added device and software, but not the plumbing that brings it together. And that's a quote from this article I'm reading. So it's an interesting play. I think it's one that makes a lot of sense. And there's quite a few probably device manufacturers out there who are just getting started who are going to have to look very seriously at this offering.
Yeah, and that's a great description of the offering. I mean, this is all the back end stuff that as a product manager or developer, you really don't want to worry about. Like, you want that stuff to work. You want it to work well, but that can consume you. And having someone build that for you, whether it's Parse, whether it's Facebook Parse, Samsung or Google, or I would say Apple, because whoever, it doesn't matter. Having somebody else do the plumbing makes the rest of the job so much easier.
Right. And I think that's definitely where it's going. Just to kind of tie this up and come full circle, this is where Samsung is placing its bets. And I think that eventually we're going to see 2 or 3 probably big players in that sort of large cloud data brokerage type of model. And I think Samsung is certainly a front runner to be one of those big players.
They are a contender.
Absolutely.
So we had a defector this week, huh?
We did. A Z-Wave defector.
Oh my gosh. This is the funniest story.
Out of this story. Yeah.
Yeah, this is so funny. So Mark Walters of the Z-Wave Alliance has joined the Zigbee Alliance as VP of Strategic Development. Now, when we were talking about this in the pre-show, we were like, "Oh, this seems like big news. Like this guy, he's the like lead sales guy, right? Like he's going to have this huge Rolodex. He's going to come in and like he knows who to call." And then you said, "Wait, isn't this the same guy that was like freaking out over Thread like a couple of months back?" And sure enough, it is.
Yeah, they had Z-Wave. I think had quite a. I don't know. They had quite a reaction when the Thread protocol was announced a few months ago, or whenever that was, and I think we had talked about it a little bit on the show, and we were just like, okay, we get it. You know, Z-Wave's been there and done that, but this guy was kind of like leading the charge on that. Mark was really out there saying, you know, Thread's kind of the shiny new object that everybody's looking at, and we're over here at Z-Wave, and we've been doing this for a long time, and I do think it jumped into my mind when I saw this story, right? Because I know that Zigbee and Thread are not the same thing, but they do seem a little bit related in terms of them being built kind of on top of, or, you know, built with similar radios, right? Like there's a hardware overlap there, and Thread is kind of a software layer in layman's terms that's sort of built on top of the same radios that Zigbee uses, right? Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, I mean, in the last, I think we may have touched this, we may have kind of bumped it, but I'm not sure. Like in the last couple of weeks, I think April 2nd, they announced that Thread and Z-Wave oh my gosh,
Thread,
these are Z, yeah. Thread and Zigbee were pretty much partnering up to like do the whole thing. So yeah, it's pretty much like Thread and Zigbee are going to be a huge player because there were a lot of people looking into Thread, especially with Nest being one of the main. I guess they developed the entire the platform there. So yeah, everybody was really talking about Thread, and then Zigbee said, "Oh yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll play in this game here." Yeah. And it looks like Mark thought that was a pretty good game to play in too. So he's jumped the ship.
It'll be interesting to watch. And Julie Jacobson in the article in CE Pro, I'm going to quote from her here. She says, "Walters has made a living over the past few years promoting Z-Wave at the expense of Zigbee, so the new rhetoric should be fun." And I couldn't agree more.
Absolutely.
I'm sure they must have made him an offer he couldn't refuse. And
yeah, you know, I mean, holy cow.
Yeah, and a guy like this, like you said, he's a businessman, and you know, obviously going to be a very valuable addition to the team over at Zigbee. He's been doing this a while, and like you said, I'm sure has a pretty impressive Rolodex, and probably brings a whole lot of value there. And so we thought it was interesting, worth noting at least, right?
Yeah, definitely a funny story to bring up. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. Jason, it's been a great time talking to you this week.
Yeah, absolutely. If
you wanted to check the show notes for this show, I will link to all the stuff we talked about over at HomeTech.fm /shows/64.
Yep, you got it. And really enjoyed talking with you, Seth. If anybody listening enjoyed the show, definitely we would encourage you to tell a friend, kind of help get the word out there. We would really appreciate that. You could also stop over to iTunes, leave us a review. We've also got a Patreon page now that we've been kind of periodically announcing and kind of reminding people about. And that's at patreon.com/HomeTech. Or you can also check out some information on our website at HomeTech.fm/support. And that's basically a way that you can support the show. You can kind of help us spread the word and keep the show running and growing and improving. And you can do that for as little as $1 a month. So if you're listening and you like the show, you think it's educational, entertaining, or hopefully both, that's a great way that you can kind of give back and say thanks. And we really, really, truly appreciate all the people that have gone and done that so far. It really means a lot.
Absolutely. And here's to another 64 more shows, because I lost count there for a minute. So
you got it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll check back in with you next week and see what's going on in the Internet of Things world and the world of home tech, Jason.
You got it. All right. Take care, Seth.